Hello and welcome to Carlyle's Picks. So I'm sure you've seen the title and you're probably confused, thinking, oh, it's a clickbait title. What's that all about? What do you mean by poverty is the secret to wealth? Well, I actually meant what I said, but it requires a little bit of an explanation, and I'm going to give that to you. So, when I say poverty is the secret to wealth, I'm saying that because poverty inspires wealth. Poverty inspires wealth in different ways. Now, one of the first ways is for example, myself. I didn't come from money. When I started out, I only had $47 in my Lamborghini account. No. Anyway, seriously, sorry, I had to do it. Anyway, but seriously, I didn't come from money, right? And because of that, that was one of the major catalysts for my success. Because I grew up seeing what it's like to not have, the ability to get the things that you wanted to. The hand-me-down type of mentality, the, worrying about the light bill type of thing, and just money being a factor, like not being able to just enjoy life, just go through life and do what you want to do. Having these constraints from, financial restrictions or limitations be an ever-present and ever-visible part of your life. So from all of that as a child, hearing all these concerns about money and things like that, that is something that as I got into approaching being an adult, I always felt like I never want to do that. I never want to worry about money. I never want to be having this stress of, how am I going to pay my bills and all this kind of stuff. Like, that was definitely a major motivating factor for me. Now, if I had been, born into a middle-class family, where we had, good amount of excess and not really so much concern about money, then I might have taken it for granted. We've always had. I've not really wanted for much, so I could go into an adulthood and just kind of like, it's not a big deal. But that's not how it was for me. So the living in a situation where, I saw the way things were financially, that was a major catalyst for my success. Because all throughout my career, I was always had the mindset of, I never want to worry about money. It wasn't for the love of money. Some people, they get caught up in the money, it's like, it's a love affair for them. That was never it for me. I never really had a love of money. What I loved was financial freedom. What I loved was being able to do what I want to do when I want to do it, right? Being able to buy the things or have the things that I want and pursue the things that I wanted to do. I really was into music. I was able to just buy myself a fancy synthesizer and all the fancy software and build up a whole studio. I think at one point in time I had, $15,000, $20,000 worth of equipment, and being able to do that and because the thing about it is, to spend that kind of money on something that's a hobby, that's something that you gotta have some money to do that, right? Most people that invest that kind of money, that's their career, that's a profession, so there's a return on it. To spend that kind of money with not necessarily any return, just the return is just your happiness, your enjoyment. That's the kind of thing that you can do from being financially successful. So that is one major factor. The other factor where I feel poverty is the secret to wealth, is sometimes having a poverty mindset, an appropriate poverty mindset, can actually inspire wealth. What I mean by that is, and why I say appropriate, I got to qualify that, because a lot of people who are in poverty, some of it's by design, but many times, far too many times, it's because of the wrong mindset. Every dollar they make, they spend. Matter of fact, if they make $1, they spend $2. There's this thing called credit, right? Very, very dangerous thing. I think credit has a lot of similarity to the dangers of things like, illicit substances like drugs, where it's addictive. You make $1, you spend $2. You make $2, you spend $4. You make $10, you spend $20. So what does that mean? You're in perpetual debt. No matter how much money you make, you keep spending more money. So you're always tight. You're always one paycheck away from disaster, right? Sure, a lot of people out there are living it up for now, but all it takes is to lose their job or something like that, happen, a medical emergency, and it's all over for them. And they keep pushing and pushing and pushing because they want. And their vision is so short-sighted. All they can see is the now. I want this thing now, and they just don't have the patience or discipline to wait, to build something, to put in the work and time and invest in something where you're looking at the long term, not just the short term. That's why we have a lot of people that are bailing out in terms of into disaster. They're leasing cars, they're spending all kinds of stuff, they're eating out all the time, they're not saving anything. So it's only a matter of time. It's like a ticking time bomb before something happens, and it always does. It always seems to happen. Some medical, job situation, family situation, and something happens that pushes them over the edge and into disaster. So when I say a poverty mindset can be the secret to wealth, I don't mean the type of mindset that people in poverty generally tend to have. You definitely don't want to have their mentality, because that's a big part of the reason why they're in poverty in the first place. Bad decisions. It's not about that their job sucks or they don't make enough money in their job. It's bad decisions. If you make the right decisions, you can have a job that doesn't really pay that much, and you can actually do well. There are people right now that are doing really well, debt-free, that have what most would consider to be low-income jobs. Now, to do that requires some really aggressive and excessive things, like, I've seen, there's one lady who was she's like a coupon queen. I mean, she didn't buy anything that wasn't on sale. I mean, she spent a lot of time researching. She would buy some things from this store, some things from another store, all because everything that she acquires, she's always focused on spending the least amount of money. So it's like little amounts going out, more coming back. So always trying to get the best deal. Every time money is being handed over, it's a deal almost, and then eliminating a lot of things. I don't need this, I don't need that, I don't need that. So excessively, it can be done. But the point is, if someone can do that at all, no matter how excessive they have to be, then what could you be with just making different decisions? So it's not really about your income, it's not really about your job. A lot of it's about you and how you think. But when I say poverty mindset, what I mean is, I'm talking about people who a lot of them are middle class. You could be lower end middle class, mid-level middle class, or maybe you're just about to break free from poverty and begin to enter into middle class status. The point is that you have a little bit of excess income. right? So you're doing things like you're buying your lunches for work, right? You're leasing cars, you're doing a lot of things where, because you have a little bit of excess income, and you feel somewhat comfortable, so you stretch things a little bit, right? But I think a very powerful strategy is to, in some ways, imagine that you're actually poor. So having a decent income while acting as if you don't. Acting as if you're making $10, $20, or even $30,000 a year less than you actually are making. That can be a very powerful strategy to achieving wealth. One of my top subscribers sent me a message saying something, I think he wanted to buy a car or a motorcycle, and he couldn't get approved for the loans that he wanted to get. I'm not really big on loans. I mean, loans serve their purpose, but I don't like to hold on to loans for any long period of time. If I'm going to buy a vehicle, ideally I'd like to pay cash for it, but there is a benefit to taking out loans in terms of your credit, right? Credit is actually a powerful tool if used properly, and to have credit, you've got to use credit, right? So even though you want to buy a $20,000 car and you can afford to pay $20,000 cash for it, instead of doing that, what you might want to do is get a $10,000 loan and put down $10,000. That's the way I would do it. So that way your car payments are super low, you lose your job, your risk or liability with that vehicle is very low, right? I actually did something like this before. I went to a dealership. I put down a hell of a lot of cash. So much so that the dealer looked at me and he was like, whoa. He wasn't used to people putting that amount of money down, because everyone wants to live beyond their means, right? Everything's on credit, right? So they go into these huge loans and they put down zero down or something stupid like $500, $1,000 down, $2,000 down, $3,000 down. You see, that's not a poverty mindset, right? Because when you put down that little money down and then you end up with these payments, $400 a month, a poor person can't afford to pay $400 a month for a car, right? A poor person, that's too much. But you, because you do physically have the money, you're like, oh, I can do that. I can do that. That's the danger. That is what I think keeps a lot of people in poverty, that kind of mindset. You look at how much money's coming in and how much money you want to spend, and you're like, oh, the math works out. But you're blind to what the future holds. Times change. You lose your job. You get a lower salary. Medical emergency happens. Family emergency happens. Something happened with your house. You have a leak. You have to pay for it. Unexpected expenses. Changes your financial trajectory, but you are already committed to this $500 a month, right? You do things the way I do things, and then you do something that is kind of bizarre. A lot of people it's kind of shocking to them. Like it's like, whoa, they would have no idea. What did I do? Driving around in a high-end car, sports car, exotic, whatever, right? And I'm sure people looking at me thinking, oh, this guy is spending all this money on that car, blah, 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 not realizing that they're actually spending more money than me. Now, obviously, the car costs more than the average car on the road, yes. But in terms of my liability, or in terms of how much the car is costing me, it was actually costing me much less. For example, I did the math. I was paying much less for this high-end vehicle than the average person was probably paying on a new Camry. So there you are, driving around in a budget-friendly vehicle. It's a Camry, man. It's a family car, right? And yet you're paying hundreds of dollars more per month than I am. Meanwhile, you're looking at me driving by and you're thinking I'm spending all this money in a car, when in fact you're spending more money than me, right? And then because I put so much money down, I do like a 1 year or 2 year loan, right? 5-year loan, 10-year loan. If it's going to take you 5 to 10 years to pay off for a vehicle, then you can't afford it. I would say if you can't afford to pay off a vehicle in 5 years, you need to be looking at a cheaper vehicle. But of course, you have certain people who won't hear that. They're just so focused on, I gotta have this. No matter how much you advise them, they're gonna do it. They're gonna lease. They're gonna take out this big loan. I remember one guy, young guy, he was paying thousands of dollars a month on some high-end BMW, and then he's taking a bus to work. And like, how can you be spending all that kind of money and you're on the bus? How does that make sense? But he wanted this high-end car, and he was willing to sacrifice his financial freedom for this vehicle, making himself almost like a prisoner to this vehicle. That's not the way you want to think. So I think think like you're poor. Think like you have a lot less money than you do. And that can be a key to wealth. Because wealth comes from preserving and multiplying your income. Right? You want to have more coming in than is going out. To do that, you need to not only cut off a lot of excess spending. Do you really need this? Do you really need that? For example, the eating, buying lunch every day. I have the money to be able to hire a company to make my meals and deliver them to me every day. Right? I can afford to do that. Do you think I do that? No. Do I do like most people and buy my lunch at work? No. What I do is I make my own meals at home and I bring them to work with me. I stockpile, I make like a whole bunch of soup or whatever it is. I put them in Tupperware, put them in the freezer, and whenever I'm going to work, I just pop them out and I'm good to go. But I don't need to do that. But I'm doing that. Yet someone who's making a lot less than me is living like they're rich. Every day they're buying their meals because they physically can afford it. And at the end of the day, they wonder why I can afford what I can afford and why they can't. Right? Because the way that I think about something as small as food, I apply that throughout my life. If I'm going to buy something, I shop around for the best deal. Right? What's the best time to buy? What's the best seller to buy from? What's the best method to buy? Right? All the time, the thought process is, how can I spend the least to get the most? Right? While other people, they have a rich mentality when they're not rich. Right? So they're making this amount of money, but they're spending this amount. So therefore, they're always in perpetual debt. So I'm going to tell you, man, some of the strategies you can use to do this kind of stuff is like some stuff that I've done in the past is, I'll give you some tips. Number one, set up an allotment. Every paycheck, a certain amount of money goes into a certain account that you don't have a credit card for, you don't have checkbooks for, you don't have easy access to. Automatically. So without thinking, you have an account that's always going in one direction. Powerful strategy. Only one direction, because you don't use the account. That account is for investments. If you want to invest in a business, you want to buy a house, things like that. It's got to be something very, very important and precious. Or it could be an emergency fund, right? But the bottom line is, no matter what you do, you could spend all you want. Doesn't matter. This account is not touched. It only goes in one direction, right? The other strategy is the main account that you use, like you have an ATM card that you buy things with, limit how much money is in that account. That's what I'm saying. That's why I say poverty is the secret to wealth. If you have an ATM card that has $10,000 access, $15,000, $20,000, for some people it's just $3,000. When you want to buy stuff, you look at, okay, I got $3,000 in this account. I'm looking at this thing, it's only $50. And that is what kills a lot of people. You heard what I just said? It's only $50. Thinking like that has been a major, major, major problem. A poison, a financial poison for many people. It's only $50, it's only $20, it's only $100, it's only 30, it's only this. And you look at your account balance, $3,000, $2,000. What is $20 compared to $3,000? Not much, truthfully. However, you do that 100 times. Do the math. 30 times 100. You do the math and look at that number. And you tell me if, oh, it's only $20 or only $30. You tell me if that makes any sense. It adds up and you don't realize it. It's just plastic. You're going around and you're just handing this thing and you're swiping it, you're swiping it, you're swiping it, you're swiping. Most of you are not doing budgets. You're not tracking your spending. And then all of a sudden, many of you look at your account and you're like, where'd all the money go? I'll tell you where it went. It went to the onlys. It's only $20. It's only $30. It's only $50. Don't fall for that. So set up an allotment, something you can do with your employer and your bank. So have another account that you do this with, right? Don't commingle your funds, your savings, or anything like that with the money pool that you're using for your day-to-day. Keep them separate, right? Another thing is, poverty mindset can help you out, is some people are so poor and struggling that they're living in a cash-only world. They can't have any credit. They got to hide their money from debtors. So they're living in a cash-only world. They have money under the bed or whatever. I'm not saying to do that. Get a safe. Get a safe. $160, Home Depot. Get yourself a safe, right? Put money in there. Why am I telling you to do this? It's a lot harder to give away those greenbacks to people than it is to just swipe some plastic. So when you actually see the money being given away, that can help you to have some self-control. Also, what you can do, in that safe, you can have envelopes, food, entertainment, whatever it may be, transportation, right? Every month you get your paycheck, you fill them up. So when you go into your entertainment envelope and you see there's only $20 in there, well, first of all, the message is sent to your brain that, hey, I'm spending too much on entertainment. I'm running out of my budget really fast, right? So now you start thinking, well, how can I cut back? Come up with ideas. But you're not going to be able to solve these problems in your spending habits if you're not paying attention. You got to pay attention. You got to track your spending. Stop acting like you're rich. Just because you have a little bit of money coming in and you can afford some things, don't act as if you're rich. It's better to act as if you're poor. Because when you do that, you can maximize your income, right? Because if you have this amount of money coming in, but then you're spending this amount of money, then it's like this is your real income. This is your net income. This is your gross income. This is your net income. Look how small that is. You want to get as close to this as possible. You want to get even higher than that. How do you do that? You got to cut your liabilities. You got to cut your spending. So money comes in like this. Instead of spending this amount, you say, hey, I don't need this. I don't need that. hey, instead of buying this, I can buy it in bulk. Right? So now your income is up here instead of down here. And people don't realize that. That's the thing. People, they have a gross mentality, right? They think about, oh, I got all this money coming in. That doesn't matter. What matters is this. How much money is left at the end of the month? If you get this amount of money, how much is left at the end of the month? Some people take this just off of their rent. Then they got a nice car, right? Got to be smart about your spending. The other thing you can do is make yourself poor to make yourself rich. What do I mean by that? That sounds crazy. Instead of splurging and spending large amounts of money on nonsense, things you don't really need, do the same thing, but instead of spending on junk and helping corporations to grow and wealthy people to be wealthier, why don't you spend that money on yourself? What I mean is, you have one guy who's not so smart about his money and he blows $1,000 in 1 month buying some nonsense. What you can do, and by doing that, he doesn't have much money left. He keeps spending like that, so he puts himself in poverty. But that scenario can actually make you wealthy, but you have to flip it. Instead of spending your money on junk, making yourself poor, what you do is you make yourself virtually poor. Take that same $1,000. So he spent $1,000 on junk. You take $1,000 and put it in that account I told you about, that special account that you don't touch. So the effect is very interesting. The guy who spent $1,000 on the junk, that money is gone, and now he's like, whoa, I got to cut back on my spending because, look, I spent too much last month. Look at what money's left, right? So he cuts back on his spending, and because of his income, limitations of his income, it might take him a few months to recover. Here's the difference with you. You spend $1,000 also, but you spend $1,000 on yourself. So you still have that money. So when you go and you act like him, because physically in your main account, the money's not there. So you do have to cut back on your spending as well. When you act like that, in the few months that this guy is recovered, he's now maybe back to where he started or even a little bit before that. You are 3 months ahead of him because not only do you have the $1,000 that he spent on junk, you still have that. It's just in another account. But also because of your conserving of your spending for those 3 months, you have that money as well. So for every additional month, you're saving for this month, you're saving for that month. So you have 1,000 plus 3 months of savings, right? Now, there's different ways you can do this. Be creative. But the main thing is force yourself into a mentality of acting as if you make $10,000, $20,000, or $30,000 less than you do. And one of the ways, like I said, really aggressive, is to take the money away. Actually make aggressive withdrawals from your account and put them somewhere else. Now, you got to be careful. Don't put yourself in a crazy situation where you go, I can't pay my rent, so now I got to go to my emergency account. You do not touch that account. That account is not to be touched unless it's an emergency or it's something major. You're investing in a business that you spend a lot of time planning on. And ideally, you don't want to spend the entire amount either, right? You always want to have some kind of nest egg to fall back on. So there's so much more to talk about, but I think you guys get the idea. Stop spending beyond your means. Stop focusing on the now. Think about the future. I know you really want to get that car. I know you really want to get that 3-car garage. I know you really want to take that trip to Italy. You saw the videos. I went to Italy. I know you want to do that, right? I get it. I've been there. But you've got to have the discipline and the self-control to say no. I have the money. to go to Italy now, but I'm not going to do it now. I'm going to take a third of the money that I would have spent on that trip, and I'm going to put it aside this month. And then next month, I'll put another third, put that down. And then the third month, I'll put the final third down, and now I've got my money to go to Italy. And now I'll go to Italy, and when I come back, there isn't going to be a major hit on my net worth. Right? If I had done it 3 months ago, I'd have taken a big hit, and in the way life works, right after you do that, something else happens, medical, whatever it is. So you just took a big hit, and then that thing happens, and then surely enough, something else happens, and before you know it, you're in trouble, right? Don't do that. Don't go down that road. Take your time. Think long-term, not short-term. Everybody thinks, oh, you only live once. Everyone acts as if, oh, I might die tomorrow, so I'm gonna live it up, right? And then you spend your entire life like that. You never spend any time building anything. You never spend any time getting anywhere because you're always living just in the moment. Be smart about how you spend your money. Stop living beyond your means. If you're making this much, think like you make this much. Think poor. If your income was cut in half, what changes would you make? Make those changes now and benefit from the power of having a poverty mindset. The right kind of poverty mindset. Not the perpetual debt mindset, but the mindset of conservation and efficiency. Only spending on what you need, always looking for the deal. You don't lease. If you rent, you think about the alternative. How is the real estate market where you are? Does it really make sense to rent or to own? What are your long-term goals? How does renting versus leasing affect that? Always think in terms of investing. Always think in terms of how can I multiply my money? I have $100. How can I make it 150? How can I make it 200? How can I make it 250? How can I multiply and expand my money, my wealth? That is the mindset to have. Well, this is Carlyle, and you're watching Carlyle's Picks, and I think this is probably one of the most important videos I've ever done. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'll try to do more videos like this. I know you guys appreciate this kind of stuff, but busy. Matter of fact, I'm in the middle of a shoot for something else, some business objectives that I'm working on right now, some new products, new ventures. But in the middle of it all, I thought I would spend some time and sharing some knowledge with you guys to help you guys to be better, to build yourselves up to growth, not just being stagnant, not just living a lie where you're just one paycheck away from disaster. All right, guys, all the success to every one of you guys. Shout out to Rico Suave, one of my top subscribers, and every single one of you guys. I really appreciate the support. All right, guys, back to work.